This is January 19th, 2026, and apparently today is National Popcorn Day. And for anyone who knows me, you know I took the day off for this. Welcome to This Day in History from, wait, that's random. I'm your host, C.L. Burns. On this day in 1937, Howard Hughes climbed into the cockpit of an airplane he helped design himself and flew from Los Angeles to Newark, faster than anyone ever had. That alone is impressive, but what makes it strange is that Hughes didn't need to do this at all. He was already rich. Not comfortably rich, absurdly rich. Oil money, Hollywood money, manufacturing money. And instead of sitting back and letting engineers and pilots take the risk, Hughes insisted on being the one in the cockpit. At the time, coast-to-coast flights were dangerous. Navigation was limited, communication was spotty, and there was very little room for error. Hughes did it anyway, chasing a record not because anyone asked him to, but because he wanted to see if it could be done. That kind of obsession feels very modern. A mix of wealth, technology, ego, and curiosity. Someone with the resources to push themselves directly into the experiment. And that's what makes this moment feel less like aviation history and more like a personality study. Because when someone is driven enough, curious enough, or obsessed enough, they don't just fund ideas. They become part of them. And that idea, obsession, turns out to be a good bridge to the next thing that happened on today's date. Because Hughes wasn't the only person shaped by intense focus and fixation. He just expressed it through machinery instead of words. Edgar Allan Poe was born on this date in 1809, which feels fitting considering how much of his work revolves around obsession, guilt, fear, and the idea that once a thought takes hold, it doesn't let go. Poe's stories aren't just scary. They're narrow. They trap the reader inside a single mind, circling the same idea until it collapses under its own weight. And Poe lived that way too. His life was marked by instability, loss, and constant financial stress. Nearly everyone close to him died young. His work went largely underappreciated while he was alive, and his own death remains one of the great unsolved mysteries in American history. Yet we celebrate his birthday. That's the strange part. We don't usually celebrate people whose work is this dark. But Poe didn't just write about fear. He structured it. He gave chaos rules. He made anxiety precise. In a way, that's not so different from what Hughes was doing, trying to impose control and meaning onto something unpredictable. Which raises an interesting question. What happens when someone is too far ahead of their time? When the obsession is real, the idea is solid, but the world just isn't ready yet? That question leads us directly into the next thing that happened on this date. In 1983, Apple announced the Apple Lisa computer. It was one of the first personal computers to feature a graphical user interface, windows, icons, and a mouse. Things so normal today that it's hard to imagine computers without them. But at that time, people didn't know what to do with it. The Lisa was expensive. It was slower than expected, and it asked users to think about computers in a completely different way, visually and intuitively. The result was failure. Not because it was a bad idea, but because it arrived too early. What makes this even stranger is what happened afterward. Apple eventually buried thousands of unsold computers in a landfill. Literally. A machine that helped shape how modern computing works today was treated like a mistake, which makes the Lisa feel oddly similar to both Hughes and Poe. Ideas and people that didn't quite fit cleanly into their moment, but ended up shaping the future anyway. Sometimes history doesn't recognize obsession right away. Sometimes it ignores it. Sometimes it buries it, and then quietly builds everything else on top of it. Anyway, those are the things that caught my attention from today in history. Check in tomorrow and we'll see where the road takes us. If you want to know more about me or the work I do, you can find everything at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and I appreciate you stopping by.